And cutter pliers, there are a lot of different names for them. Personally, I call them shoemaker pliers. But they really get in corners and they don't mar when you're pulling. If you don't already own a pair, get a pair. They're just phenomenal. You could pull a bad nail through the backside with them, and in this case, since it's a light colored wood, you could just repair the damage with wood filler. If you're a noob, your natural tendency will be to jump right in and sand this off. Don't do that. You just clog up your sandpaper. Instead, use one of these. Now you can use sandpaper. This tip is doubly so if you're ever using auto body filler, because that ruins sandpaper. Scrape first. Right now I have it all arranged with all the spacer blocks in place, and this is its final form. I'm happy with it, so now I'm going to take all the parts, set them over there, and nail it together. I'm doing what would be the part of the drawer that's closest to me when I open it up. I'm doing these ones first because we want to be certain that these gaps are closed, because you'll see them whenever the drawer is opened. I'm pleased with that. None of the nails came through the side. So far, I'm batting 1,000. All that's left is to nail these 4 on the back of the drawer. And I have these 2 spacers. They're really special. I used them to keep these channels perfectly uniform. And now I'll use them to set these back corner ones first. It is not often that I have to use these big clamps. These last 2 are staying nice and centered, so I must have done a pretty good job at keeping it all nice and straight. I guess the nature of tight tolerances is that they're just a pain. It's not going to go down or out too easily. It's just a square meeting a square, and it's unforgiving. Well, as long as you don't have 2 lacquered surfaces touching, it'll be okay. So, you know, try to think about that. It's something that it's easy to overlook. A surface, when you build up a finish on it, like polyurethane or lacquer, it has a thickness, and if you multiply that by 4, as in the case of this surface, the inside of the drawer, and the same on both sides, that's 4 coatings, and that's quickly a lot of thickness, especially when with respect to a tight tolerance like this. In this case, I am going to use a spray lacquer to quickly finish. I want to redo the face and put a nice coat on this. I also want to put that stuff on the bottom. More on that in a bit, but for now, you may have thought that I forgot about my partition blocks, right? No. So, I'll line up this edge and this edge, and miter saw it by just riding right along this without cutting the top one. I'm duplicating it. It's kind of a tough skill. Don't try holding something this small on your miter saw unless you have a 0 clearance deck like I do. Okay, I know it seems crazy, but my fingers are actually quite safe here. but I have a lot of experience with this thing. If you're uncertain, you might want to try something like this, but you'll probably suffer a little bit of a loss of control. The reason I say that is because with a miter saw, a lot of it is feel, and so you're continuously taking feedback from it. And you really can't have that when you're using something like a stick. I may have cut that a little short. You have to consider risk, but I prefer to use my fingers. All of making stuff is a cost-benefit analysis. You're asking yourself all the time, is it worth it? Is it worth the risk? Is it worth my time investment? Why don't I just buy one? You have to make these decisions for yourself. It's part of being an adult. And autonomy. And self-reliance. I'm typically not one to preach safety stuff, but I will say this about a miter saw. Don't ever, ever, ever put your hand under the blade while it's turning. The reason that I say that is because these internal mechanisms have a spring inside, and those springs can snap. It's just steel. And when it does, this head is way heavier than you can hold this way. I don't care how tough you are. I've seen them break. The old Hitachis, I remember as a kid, we used some of them that had broken springs. And it's something you want to never forget. Keep your hand out of the red zone. See what I'm doing? I know some of you hate surprises. This will be a sliding partition. But first, let's put a notch in it to get that down lower so that its appearance is consistent. The idea is a sliding, adjustable partition. And I don't exactly expect it to stay perfectly still, but the idea is that if there's stuff in one cell, it's not going to get into the other cell, and thus it will remain separated. Self-adjusting, I suppose. We'll find out if it works after a year. Okay, let's give this a finish and put the white stuff in and call this finished. I gave the face a light sanding, and I'm using spray lacquer. The only reason I'm doing this is because it matches what was here. I'm thinking I would like to use polyurethane for the divider. Don't be dazzled by the shine of spray lacquer. It's just artificial, like a candy shell. If given the choice, I would prefer to use polyurethane for everything. But there's caveats. Polyurethane's tough to use and it's time consuming.